Alrighty. Good morning, everybody. Who went to the party last night? That was pretty good. Really good band. I had a good time. You guys have a good time? All the free beer you can drink? What's better than that? All right. This is one of my favorite talks. I love this. This talk is on the Windows Automated Installation Kit. Microsoft calls it the Windows WAIK. I like to call it the WAIK. I'm not sure which is better. But Windows WAIK makes it sound like it's a pain to deal with. And some of the tools are. So I'm going to walk you through a whole lot of command line utilities and try to explain why you care, why you want to learn those tools. I'm Rhonda. For those of you who haven't sat any of my other sessions, I've been in IT for a really, really long time. I joined the Navy back in 1982. And they have you take a test to figure out where your aptitude lies, what you'd be good at. They said, hey, you'd be good with computers, so that's how I ended up here, almost 30 years later. I'm a Setup and Deployment MVP and a Desktop Deployment Product Specialist. Are there any other DDPSs out there? None? It's only one exam to get the certification. It's a doozy of an exam, though. It covers WAIK, MDT, SCCM, and WDS. So you have to know everything about all of the products to pass the test. But it's a pretty fun test. All right. What we're going to cover today. I'm going to talk a little bit about WIM image formats. I'm going to show you how to mount a WIM, how to get information on a WIM if you're not the one who created it. I think a lot of people walk into situations where somebody else created the images and now it's your job to deploy them, but you don't really know what's in them. So I'll show you how to figure out what's inside a WIM, how to mount it, and then how to add drivers to it. You can remove drivers, and document your WIMs. Who loves to document? Oh my gosh, 2 people raised their hand. It's more than I've ever gotten. The reason you want to learn the WAIK tools is because all the other tools use these nice, friendly wizards. And they just ask you a few questions, and then magically under the hood, things happen. Well, the things that are happening are these tools are running. So if you need to troubleshoot something, you have to know these tools. MDT uses them. WDS, you can use these tools with some of the WDS utilities. So it's really important that you do understand the WAIK tools by themselves. I've gotten myself out of a jam many times when MDT didn't do something properly, and I had to figure out, wait, it created a WIM file, but it didn't create the ISO file. So I'd go convert the WIM file to an ISO, which I'm going to show you how to do. Or there was one scenario where it created an ISO, but the ISO wouldn't boot. So I grabbed the WIM file, created an ISO, made it bootable, and mine booted fine. So that was like a 5-minute fix because I knew these tools. If you don't know these tools, it's going to be really difficult to learn them while you're troubleshooting because the documentation is so vast. Microsoft, I think, really took a hit with people saying, well, you don't document things. Man, they documented everything this time. You can print reams of documentation off these tools. And I was more confused after I read the documentation than when I had first begun. So I'm going to give you just the bottom line, some crib notes, so that you can get up and running in a lot quicker time than I did. The tools inside the WAIK are Deployment Tools Command Prompt. Looks just like any other command prompt, but it's different, and I'll show you why. We're going to run ImageX. ImageX allows you to apply and capture images, but I want to give you a little bit more information on ImageX. I want to talk about compression levels that you can use with ImageX. Got a great slide for that. And then we've got this new kid on the block, Deployment Image Servicing Management, DISM. Has anybody played with DISM yet? Don't you love the short, easy commands you type in? Yes, and those 5 people are laughing now. All these commands like wrap 3 times around the screen. They're huge, long commands. And autocomplete doesn't work with them, which really stinks. You should write that on all your evals. We want autocomplete with the WAIK tools, DISM especially. Then I'm going to show you OSCD-IMG, Operating System CD Image Creator. That's the tool that I can point at a WIM and say, make that an ISO. Or make that a bootable ISO. I'm going to show you how to do that. One of my favorite tools, Windows System Image Manager, WSIM. This tool took me 3 months to figure out. I'm not embarrassed to say that because I've talked to a lot of people who have never figured it out, don't want to ever know anything more about it, and were so frustrated with the tool, they said, I'm just going to hope that nothing ever breaks. But WSIM is really important. If you're using Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, which I'll show you, and you open up a task sequence that you've created, you go to the OS Info tab and you tell it to open the script, it opens WSIM. So if you don't know WSIM, the first time you open that script, you're like, whoa, what is all that stuff? I mean, there's stuff all over the screen. So it's really important. Get a hold of some good documentation for WSIM. I've got that documented in the slide deck. I've got a little cheat sheet out there for you. Within 20 minutes, you could have a WSIM script up, running, and deploying Windows 7 completely unattended. You do have to supply your product key. I didn't give you guys a product key, so that's the one thing that you will have to supply. I'll talk a little bit about User State Migration Tool, USMT 4.0, and the new feature that it has that everybody's raving about is hard links. So I'm going to talk a little bit to you about hard links. Then I'm going to mention Volume Activation Management Tool, VAMT. How many of you are enterprise clients? A good number. How many of you that are enterprise clients are using KMS, the Key Management Service? Okay. Activation and KMS later on. Out of those people, who's using VAMT? Nobody knows about it. It's amazing. I love this tool. This tool allows you, when you're dealing with KMS, you can have a couple different types of licensing keys, like multiple activation keys, MAC keys. Those usually are used for like the sales force. People who are never in the office, their machines are never connected to the network, they can't activate with your internal KMS server, so you give them a MAC key. Well, what happens if one of those laptops gets repurposed to somebody else who's always in the office? And now you want to change that MAC key to be a volume license key. One of the cool things VAMT does, it'll reach across the network, grab that machine, and change the license for you. That machine could be in Europe. That machine could be any place in the world. And as long as VAMT can connect to it, it can make changes. So I really like VAMT. It's a pretty cool tool. It also keeps track of how many clients have activated and how many are out of activation. So it's kind of nice to know those numbers. I love volume activation. Microsoft says they're helping us. I'm not Microsoft, that's why I can say that. They say they're helping us keep track of our licenses. Do you guys believe that? I'm waiting for the day where they're like, okay, now we want your KMS server to report your number of licenses weekly to us. I figure that's just around the corner. The last tool is Copy PE. This is the one that allows you to create custom WinPEs. And I'm going to talk more about a WinPE in just a minute. First, the deployment process. You have a reference machine. Some of these terms they just came up with on the fly. And I'll tell you a couple stories on those when I get into them. I did the same thing. I forgot to turn my timer on again. So I've got my reference machine. I install an operating system, applications, sysprep that machine, get it to look and feel exactly the way I want my image to be. Then I'm going to create an image. I could use image X. I could use MDT's task sequence that does sysprep and capture. I could use WDS's WDS capture utility. So you've got a bunch of different options. My favorite is image X. I applied a 2003 R2 image complete with all kinds of applications, hardware applications, and utilities on it in 7 minutes. It's just a file copy. So it's vastly different from the old days when you were doing those sector-based images. And we had the problems with, oh, that's not the exact same size hard drive that our image is. So you'd have to create another image for it. Not anymore. All you're doing with these images, with WIM images, is just copying files over. So we get our image, we put that image on the deployment server, and then we blast it out to our target or destination machines. Does that completely take away the HAL, the hardware abstraction layer? Windows 7, or actually Vista, started taking that away, not the deployment tools, but they're using generic HALs now inside the operating systems. So you do not have to have an image for each individual HAL that you've got out there. Great question. All right, let's talk a bit about creating new images. Where we are right now, we've got our reference machine. We've installed an operating system, Windows 7. We put some applications on there, Office 2010. Now, we need to get an image of the machine. Well, you can't image a computer with that operating system up and running. So you're going to have to boot that operating system into an alternate operating system. If you captured an image of that machine while it's currently up and running in that OS, it would be like trying to change the tire on a car as it's going 60 miles an hour down the highway. You've got processes open, file handles all over the place. It's not a good idea to capture an image of an operating system while it's up and running. Who knows what the alternate operating system is you're going to boot into? WinPE. I just heard a lot of people say it. Windows Pre-Installation Environment. What's the old one in the old days that we used to boot into? DOS. Awesome. I wish I had a gift to give away. The good old days. All right, so I've got to boot that guy into an alternate operating system, and that's going to be my WinPE. All right, so what is WinPE? WinPE is a scaled-down version of Windows 7. They've gotten in there and ripped great big chunks of the operating system out of there. So it's just a really baby little OS. In fact, there's no GUIs at all, command line only. Boots into an X drive. It's a RAM drive. Older versions, Microsoft does learn quickly. Older versions of WinPE, it would boot from the CD that you would put it on. And then if you took the CD out and tried to put in a utility to run on that machine, maybe a rootkit evaluator or sniffer. So you'd put the other CD in, you crashed the operating system when you took that first CD out. So they learned, oh yeah, okay. Maybe we should go ahead and just boot WinPE into a RAM disk. You can take that CD out and in all day long. It's not going to hurt a thing. There is no .NET. So any applications you would like to install on a WinPE that require .NET, never going to run. It's not a full-blown OS. It's just bits and pieces of an OS. In fact, it's a little strange that when I boot WinPE up, I'm connected to the network. I can map drives across the network, but nobody can map a drive to that machine. So you've got the workstation service, but you don't have the server service that allows incoming network connections to that machine. And what you're going to need is something called a technician machine to create a WinPE. Isn't that a neat name, technician machine? At the last summit, we asked them, what was the reasoning behind the name of the technician machine? And I'm not kidding. I couldn't make this up. They said, look, it was Friday night. It was 8 o'clock. We had to come up with a name for this. Someone said technician machine. We said, done. Let's go home. That's how it happened. That's how we got technician machine. So your technician machine can be Vista, SP1, or anything later, including server OSs. And installing Windows Automated Installation Kit makes that a technician machine. Now, you do have some requirements for the WAIK to be installed. .NET Framework, MS XML 6.0, and you have to be able to support MMC 3.0 snap-ins. Well, honestly, 2003 is the only one that you might have problems with. All the other OSs have all of that included in the OS itself. This is what WinPE looks like. Boots to the X drive. And of course, you don't have all the commands that you could normally run on an operating system, but you do have some really powerful commands. One of the most powerful utilities is going to be WPE util. You guys need to pipe WPE util's help file to a text file, print that thing off, and sit down and go through it with a fine-tooth comb to find out what pieces you're going to use in your environment. And everybody's going to find something different. But this tool is like the big daddy. He does everything when it comes to WinPEs. You've got regedit, so you can edit the registry. You have the network shell, netsh, so you can change your IP. You could tell it to be DHCP. You could change your DNS information. And then you've got diskpart. Diskpart's been out for quite a while now. But how many of you know diskpart? That's a pretty good number. I'd say that was half the crowd. How many of you have heard of fdisk? Diskpart is the new fdisk. Kind of on steroids, though. It does a whole lot more than fdisk did. But it allows you to carve out partitions on a hard drive. What's new with this version of WinPE? They've done some really nice things with it. XML scripting support is there by default. With WinPE 2.0, you had to add the scripting support. And we add things like that, scripting support, WMI scripts, MDAX scripts, HTML scripts. You add those by adding packages. No PowerShell. PowerShell requires .NET, doesn't it? Never going to run. That was one of our first questions. We're like, you said everything's going PowerShell. How come we haven't gone PowerShell on this? And they were trying to figure out how to get just a scaled down version of .NET, and they haven't figured it out. It's just too big to put on a WinPE. So we've got these packages that give us additional scripting support. In the past, those packages were inside your image. And they would tell you it was a good idea to prep your image when you were done. So the packages you hadn't flipped the bits on and said, yes, use that one, yes, use that one. There were only about 8 of them. You would prep it, and it would remove the ones that you didn't use. They said, oh, you must do this. It greatly reduces the size of your image. I said, wow, greatly reduces the size of the image. I'm all for that. So I didn't add any packages. I prepped my image, and it saved me 17 megs. And it also broke the image so I couldn't manage it later. So when you prepped it, you were kind of like sealing the image. So it was more difficult to add drivers, remove drivers, add patches, and things like that later on. So I never, ever prepped my images. Now you don't have to worry about that because those additional packages are not inside the image. They're external to it. So there's no more prepping. You don't have to worry about breaking it so you can't use it later. The other new thing is DISM. DISM actually grew out of a conversation 2 or 3 years ago now at the MVP Summit. Microsoft asked us, guys, these tools are free. Why isn't everyone in the world using them? And we said, because you make it too hard. The syntax is different for every single one of your tools. It's ridiculous. I don't know if you guys noticed this on the WPE util. Look at this command. WPE util space shut down. Shouldn't that have a dash, a slant, something? No. If you put something in there, you just broke the command. So every single command they had this different syntax, and it was a nightmare to try to figure out how to run everything. And so they said, okay, we're hearing that you want consistency. And we're like, yes, we want consistency with commands. So package manager, which was a nightmare to use, international configuration for adding language packs, things like that, and PE, command line tool utility that allows you to inject drivers. All those have been replaced by DISM. So now DISM performs all those features. What DISM cannot do, it cannot create or apply an image. ImageX is still the only command line utility that can do that. DISM cannot do that. So let's say we booted our machine into an alternate operating system. It's running WinPE now. And we need to capture an image using ImageX. It's pretty simple. You would just type in ImageX, give it the / capture switch, tell it the volume you want to capture, the path and name of the WIM file you'd like to create, and then you have to give it a description in quotes. If you'd like to store it across the server, in the second scenario here, I've mapped a drive, W, to the WDS server, images, shared folder. Then you can tell it to ImageX capture the C volume, put it on the W drive, name it this, and give it this description. But something happens when you store this across the network. Verification gets turned on. And it will take 3 to 5 times longer to capture or apply an image when verification is turned on and you're going across the network. So I always recommend capture it locally. You can even capture the C volume like I showed you there and store it on the C volume. It's not going to include the WIM file in your image. You don't have to worry about that. It's smart enough to not do that. But if you do put it on the network, it's going to take a lot longer, so always store it locally. Or if you're applying it, copy it down locally and then apply the image from the C partition after you've created it. Can you plug a flash drive into the PC and use it? If it can read it, absolutely. Your drive letters get kind of strange in WinPE. All of a sudden, that hidden 100 meg drive you get on Windows 7 machines, just in case you want to use BitLocker, that guy gets the C drive, and then Windows is on the D drive. So things are a little strange when you get into WinPE and you're trying to search around for your drives. A lot of people do this, and I was guilty of it myself. I captured the C drive in WinPE. Well, that was just a 100 meg partition. So when I applied that, it really didn't do anything. What I needed to do was capture the D drive. Files excluded from your image. If you take a look at these, the recycle bin, page file, hyper file, you wouldn't want those inside an image. You're going to get brand new ones created once you deploy the machine. So these are excluded by default. And I love this one. Compression and your image. If you do want to save storage space, what I did is I took the exact same machine, I created the image 3 different times, and I used the 3 different compression algorithms on it. So it's the exact same image. A Win7 image not compressed, and guys, I don't have any applications, I have nothing on this. This is just the operating system. Came out at about 4.36 gigs and took around 5-6 minutes. A Win7 image with fast compression, whew, saved me some disk space there. Now compound that by 10, 20 images that you might have. Took less than 7 minutes. If you did no compression at all, I barely saved anything between those two. And it took 23 plus minutes. So you're really not gaining a lot by using the max compression. And if you don't specify a compression switch at all, you get fast. Fast is the default. Applying the image, it really didn't make any difference. Here I copied it locally on the C drive, told it to apply the image. And the image that wasn't compressed, you can see took 5.5 minutes. Fast compression, 5.45. Those are pretty neck and neck. All of them were less than 6 minutes to actually apply that image. Let's take a look at how we can create our WinPE. There we go. I'm going to go over to my 2008 server. I had to reinstall the WAIK tools like 15 minutes before this talk, so this should be lots of fun to see if anything works now. You can do it. Come on, little machine. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? First thing I'm going to do, once you've installed WAIK, it's going to be listed under All Programs, Microsoft Windows AIK, and I'm going to launch the Deployment Tools command prompt. Like I said, I just reinstalled this, and I'd like for you to be able to read what I'm doing. Let's go to about 16, and I'm going to make the screen text a nice, pretty blue, green, so you can read that. All right, first thing that's interesting about this command prompt, it's not like the regular CMD. The difference is the command prompt that comes with the WAIK actually changes the path statement in your environment variables to point to where these tools live. So it knows who ImageX is. If I'm on just a regular everyday command prompt and I type in ImageX, it says, I don't know what that is. But if I typed in Program Files, WAIK, PE Tools, x86, ImageX, then it has the complete path and it knows who the tool is. I don't have to do that on this guy. I can just type ImageX and I get the help file because it's pointing to where the tools live. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to do a directory listing and make sure the directory I'm about to create doesn't exist. And I'm going to run copy PE x86 and create a new folder called WinPE. Now the first thing, this is a 32-bit WinPE that I'm creating. If you want to create a 64-bit, you change that to AMD 64. I'm not sure if Itanium is supported any longer or not. Second thing, The folder that I gave it, WinPE, you can name that anything you choose. It does not have to be called WinPE. You could just say W or Win. What we have is, I've got another folder called Mount. The Mount folder is completely empty. It's just there so that I can mount images into it and manage my images. So that's the Mount folder I'm going to use. etfsboot.com. Anybody ever heard of El Chorrito File System Bootable? That's been out there for a really long time. This is the file that's going to allow me to take a WIM file, convert it to an ISO, and make it El Chorrito bootable. I'll show you that command here in just a second. The first thing I'm going to do is mount my WinPE. It gave me just a basic WinPE.WIM. That's my WinPE. So the first thing I want to do is mount it. And to mount it, I'm going to use DISM. You're going to love these. WIM file. This is the only one I'm typing out for you. I just want you to feel my pain first. Mount directory. Let's see. DISM, mount WIM. The WIM file I want you to mount is C:\WinPE, WinPE.WIM, index 1. You can put more than one image inside a WIM file. And then you'll have image index 1, 2, 3, 4. Each one of those would be a different image, but you're storing it all inside one single WIM file. Mount directory. How could it have possibly, this is going to be fun, already mounted. Let's go see what it's talking about. And it's not. Let me try one thing. See if I can fool it. I'm going to change the name. Mounter. Okay. Obviously, I had done something with a WinPE.WIM, and I didn't unmount it properly. I do things like that all the time. That's how I find out how to fix things, is I'm constantly breaking them. And it's really not on purpose most of the time. All right. So we've got this guy mounted. You saw I just changed his name. For some reason, this machine thinks there's a WinPE.WIM mounted somewhere. What you'll have in your mount folder is program files, users, and a Windows folder. That's your mounted WIM. If this were an operating system image, you're going to get the same things. A couple additional folders, but this is what it looks like to have it mounted. And you want to see how hard it is to customize a WinPE? I'm going to go down to, excuse me. Those are making it really hard for me to type. Okay, let's go down to Program Files and WAIK, Tools, x86. I'm going to copy image X. We'll go back to WinPE mount. I always put it in the Windows folder. I now have a custom WinPE. I don't understand this. Microsoft did not include image X in your WinPEs. But you're always going to put it in there. It's a little teeny tiny baby program. I'm not sure why it's not there by default, but it's not. You're going to have to put it in just like I did. All right, so we've customized the image. Now, I'm going to show you a shortcut in just a minute so we don't have to keep typing these out. Unmount the WIM. Make sure I got this right. DISM. Unmount WIM. Mount dir. I'm missing a colon. All right, and we get error 87. That's actually a good thing. Who in the past has ever used ImageX to mount an image, make changes to it? Maybe you injected a whole bunch of drivers, you put some applications in there, and then you unmounted it and you went, oh, I forgot to save my changes. With ImageX, you could do that. You can't do that with DISM. DISM says, no. You have to tell me what you want to do. You have to either tell me you want to commit those changes or you want to discard them. You can't just unmount it any longer. So it really is a safeguard for us. So if I do the exact same command, tell it to commit those changes. Takes just a couple seconds there to unmount the guy. All right, that looks good. Completed successfully. Now, I have to copy that boot.wim into WinPE, ISO, sources folder. If it were still named WinPE.wim, you have to rename it to be boot.wim when you put it in this folder for this to work. You have no choice, must be boot.wim, and it has to be in the sources folder. All right, so we've got that guy in there now. And here's the fun command. OS CD IMG -N -B. I'm going to explain this in a second. Okay, what I'm telling it to do, run OS CD IMG, create an ISO for me. This is the utility that will create an ISO. Allow for long file names inside. Make it bootable, not just any kind of bootable. I want it to be ETFS El Chorrito file system bootable. Do not put a space in between that B and etfsboot.com. It'll error out. Look inside the WinPE ISO folder. Whatever you find in that folder, which is the sources folder and everything in it, including the boot.wim, I want you to create an ISO of that data. I want you to put it in the WinPE folder, and I want you to name it winpe.iso. And this guy's really pretty fast. If I do a directory listing, get that up where you can see it, you'll now see I have a winpe.iso. So what can you do with that? Burn it to a CD. The winpe.wim, you could take that and put it on a UFD. You can put it on an external hard drive. So you could boot WinPEs using whatever media you choose. I can copy that over to my desktop machine, which I've already copied one over, WinPE ISO, and then boot up a new VM with it. That's what my WinPE looks like that I just created. I'm not sure in this one if I added ImageX or not. I did. That's usually the first thing I do when I create a new WinPE is put ImageX in it, because you're always going to use it to capture or apply images. All right, any questions on creating a custom WinPE? The slide deck has step-by-steps for you, so when you get a hold of the slide deck, you can actually just copy and paste these commands. When we get back to DISM here in a minute, I'm going to show you how to make shortcuts for all those ugly, long DISM commands as well. The next piece of information is, how do you get info on an image? How do you know what's actually in the image? Is it a WinPE? Is it an operating system image? How many images are inside the WIM file? So getting information can be done in one of two ways, either using ImageX or DISM. I've got examples listed for you here. This is the line for getting it for ImageX, and this is the line for getting it for DISM. All right, I'm still in my deployment tools command prompt. And if we look on the F drive, show you that I have some WIM files in a WIMs folder. So that's what we're going to get some information on one of these files. So to get the information, let's use ImageX first. We'll do ImageX /info F. Wow. Let's scroll back up to the top where I typed it in. So I told it, image X, here's the info switch. Go look at that WIM file and give me all the information about it. And man, does it give you all the information about it. So the first thing we look at is, okay, there's 5 images in here. I can see that from the image count. 5 images in this one install.wim. If we cruise down, we can see this is image index number 1. Oh, here's how many directories, how many files, how many total bytes. I mean, it gives you tons of information here. It is starter edition. Windows 7 starter. We go to image index 2, cruise down, we can see that this guy is home basic. Image index 3, he's home premium. Image index number 4, that's professional. Anybody want to guess what 5 is? Ultimate. Okay, so it's a lot of information you're looking at here. Let me show you what DISM does with this exact same information. I'm going to do DISM, get WIM info. See, wouldn't autocomplete be wonderful right here? Doesn't work, though. There. I think I prefer that. So here's the command, get the WIM information, go look at that WIM file over there. Give it the path and the name. And then it tells you, okay, here's the details for it. Image index 1, that's Windows Starter, and this is the size. Index 2, Home Basic, 3, Home Premium, 4, Professional, and 5, Ultimate. It's a lot nicer. It's a lot prettier. I have to tell you, with all the things I've done with the deployment tools over the years, I've never ever needed the information that ImageX shouts out at you with the info switch. So DISM makes it a little bit prettier for you and easier to use. All right, now we're going to get into DISM. DISM is only supported on Vista, SP1, and later. And DISM works kind of strangely for a utility. What actually happens is inside Vista 1 operating systems, there are DISM providers. Then, inside Windows 7 operating systems, there are different DISM providers. And inside Server 2008 R2, yet another set of DISM providers. So when you create an image, Vista, Windows 7, or Server 2008 R2, and you run DISM on that WIM file, DISM will behave differently based on the providers that are inside the operating system. Does that make sense? I don't know why they did it that way. But you will have different behaviors. You can do certain things on a Windows 7 machine that you can't do on a Vista machine with DISM, because it's actually cracking open that image, looking inside for the DISM providers, and whatever those providers can do, that's all DISM can do on that image. It's a little strange. The other thing that was strange, so using DISM, the documentation started talking about with or without image context. What is image context? To this day, I still have no idea what they meant by image context. But I know that if I'm on my 2008 R2 server and I just want to look at the DISM help file, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot I can do with it. I can get mounted WIM info, get WIM info. You guys have seen that one. I can unmount a WIM, mount a WIM. I can change the edition. This help file is not pointed at a specific image, where if I did this, let's try this. It worked. What I told it to do, DISM, look at my image that's currently running as my operating system. You can also point this to a mounted operating system image, WIM file, and tell it, give me the help on that. If it's a Vista image, it's going to have a different help file than a Windows 7 or Server 2008 R2. Notice what I can do now that I've given it a context. I've told it which image I want to find out what it can do things to. Now I can set product keys. I can change the edition. I could go from professional to ultimate as long as you have the right product keys. It's not magic. It's not going to do everything for you. You can add drivers. You can remove drivers. You can get driver information. Look at all these switches you can do with DISM after you give it a context. All right, so now I'm going to show you one of my easy cheat sheets that I like to use. These commands are so long and they're so difficult. You leave out one colon and the entire command breaks. So this is the world's best help file. I've never seen, and it's like this 22-year-old girl who wrote this help file. She did a phenomenal job with it. I'm going to do DISM, and let's just say Mount Wim. Give me help on that, and I'm going to pipe it to a text file. Well, of course, F:\\, let's call it MW for Mount Wim. Then we'll use Notepad to open this guy up. And then I just come down to the examples. She's given you examples for every single switch. So you can just pipe these out, and I promise you're going to do the same things over and over and over and over again. You're always going to mount. You're always going to unmount. So it's nice to start keeping a little cheat sheet in Notepad that anytime you want to do it, you just come in and you look at the command, and you don't have to put the dism.exe. Mount Wim. Wim file we're going to mount. It's going to be C:\\. We'll just use the one we already had. Was WinPE. Boot.wim. Tell it the image index. Get rid of those extra spaces there. The mount dir, I want it to go into WinPE mount. Let's see if we just highlight this line. Take it out to our command prompt. Paste it in. And it's going to mount it back up for us while it's doing that. I'm going to open my cheat sheet. Oh, hopefully. Let's just change that to a TXT. Oh, well, that did not help at all. Let me show you this one. And find the right one here. These are the first utilities that I ran. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add some drivers. So I have drivers on my C drive. To add the drivers, it'll be DISM. The image is going to be in the WinPE mount folder where I just mounted. The switch is add driver, and then you have to tell it where the drivers are. So I have a couple of drivers in a drivers folder on the root of C. Will it accept drivers that are not signed? Not by default, but you can give it the force unsigned driver switch, which I have documented in here for you. And 64? Excellent. 64-bit, you just can't. It has to be signed for 64-bit OSs. 32, you can do force unsigned. It's not recommended. All right, so I've got two drivers that were successfully installed. Great. How many other drivers are in that? Let's say you guys didn't create this image. I didn't create the image. I need to find out what drivers are in this stupid image. Well, now let's go over here and tell it to get driver information. Hope you don't mind I'm cheating. And then it spits out a list of drivers. Oh, yes, and it renames them for you. Isn't that helpful? So now you've got one driver called OEM0. Next one's OEM1. If you just go down and look at the provider name, that'll help you with a little bit of additional information. And there's more than one way to get this list. What if you have 45 drivers? You don't want this big, long list of drivers there. So what we can do is grab this command. Tell it we'd like to see it in the format of a table. It's a little bit prettier. But here's the best part for all those people who said they love documenting. You can do this command. Let's get it up where you can see it. And then tell it, pipe it to f:\\, drivers.txt. There's your documentation. You can do that with packages. I mean, within 5 minutes, you can fully document one of your images, slap it in a book, you're done. Manager's not going to be saying, you've got to document things. We have to know you've got 73 images out there. How do we know what's in each image? Just document this short and sweet. I think it's one of the coolest tools that you can use. So DISM really rocks. There's a lot you can do with DISM, but make your cheat sheet so that you're not sitting there typing for days on end and you forget that one colon, you've got to go back through the whole command again. So make your cheat sheet, I promise you'll use it often. All right, I'm going to get back to the slide deck. And we've covered these. Just to let you know, these are the documentation slides for adding drivers. You can point to a folder and say, go to that folder and recurse. So add the drivers in that folder and every folder beneath it. You can remove drivers, add unsigned drivers, get driver information. I'm going to scoot through these because I think I'm on like slide 26 of 67. Here are your step-by-steps for creating a VHD. If you would like to create a VHD, it's completely different than creating a WIM file, but this is going to take a while. It's probably going to take you a couple hours to create a VHD using these step-by-steps. So what you actually do is you create a VHD, you attach it. You can do that through the disk management user interface if you don't want to use the DISM commands or disk part commands. Then you would add a WIM file into your VHD, unmount it, and then when you copy it to another machine, don't do this last step on the same machine. Who's played with BCD Edit? Boot Configuration Database Editor. Who's heard of boot.ini? Okay, BCD is your new boot.ini, and once again, this guy's on steroids. He does a whole lot more than boot.ini ever did. But BCD Edit, if you run this command on a machine that you're just playing around and testing with, BCD Edit is going to edit the boot configuration database of that local machine. When you restart that computer, when you come up the next time, you're going to be booting that VHD. So you need to make sure that you only run this BCD Edit command on the machine that you want to boot that VHD from. You can always fix it, but it's just a real pain and quite a surprise to boot your real-life machine and it boots up into that VHD and you're like, whoa, what happened? And you have to go back and do some more BCD commands. WinPE step-by-steps, you'll find them on my website. WSIM, I might not have too much of a chance to demo this. What do you have on time for me? I can't hear you. 10 minutes. All right, I'm going to scoot through these a little quicker. Windows System Image Manager allows you to create automated, unattended XML files. To open WSIM, it'll be in Windows AIK, Windows System Image Manager. And this is what it looks like for those of you who have not opened WSIM. The first thing you have to do is tell it to select a Windows image. I'm going to choose install.wim and the ultimate version. Then you create a new answer file. What's listed here, these are the stages that an installation goes through. They're called configuration passes. Some fancy name for them. The whole point here is you can add various components to your answer file. Resize the window so we can see some things. Let's go down to Setup and Disk Configuration. I'm just going to show you one of these. You have to go, on some of these it's very interesting. On some of these you have to go all the way down to the child object, and then you get everything in between. On some components, if you grab the parent item, you get everything beneath it. There's no rhyme or reason to it, so you're going to have to do a lot of testing when you start playing with WSIM. I'm going to right-click and tell it to add the setting to pass 1. Notice that when I add these settings, the only thing that is available is pass 1. I can't add it to pass 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Some of these you can add to every single pass. So you have to start playing around with what happens if I add it to pass 1 instead of 4 or 7. 1, 4, 7 are the passes you're always going to add information to. So you would add your components, put them in your answer file, and then come over to the answer file, highlight the component, and then configure it. Here, I'm going to say create a partition, and I want it to extend to encompass the entire drive. It'll be the first partition. Not going to tell it the size. If I give it a size and I told it to extend, that'll blow up my WSIM script. The type, it's going to be a primary. So this is how you create your automated unattended installation file. You save it. When you save it, it actually goes through something called verification. And if there are any just blatantly wrong fields or fields that you said add and you didn't fill them in and it must be filled in, it'll come up down here in the messages window. And the cool thing is you can double click on that message and it'll pop you right directly to that exact component so you can go and make the change. Short, I know. But that's a WSIM script. Let's talk a little bit about USMT. This is to gather users' state, users' data, settings, like IE favorites, what their desktop looks like, and application settings. And then you can store those either locally or on a server somewhere, change the operating system on that machine to Windows 7, and then bring them back down. Hard links allows you to store them locally. If you store it locally and you've used the hard link switch, the data doesn't move. It's stuck where it is. Everything is written all around it. I like to format the drive in between OSs, so I don't ever use hard links. But if you had somebody who had 60 gigs of data, hard links might be a good option for you. You don't want to store that on a server and wait for it to get stored and then pull it back down again. So I can see there are reasons to use hard links, but if you use hard links and you format the drive, everything's gone. USMT and the supported operating systems, if you take a peek at the bottom of this, on XP, the only thing that's supported is scan state. So you can gather users' data, but you can't apply it. Applying it is not supported. It is supported on Vista and later. So you can run scan state to gather the data and load state to put it back down. All right, volume activation 2.0. We're almost done. Activation, Microsoft says, is just a way for you to be sure you're running a genuine copy of the operating system. We've had it since Vista. We have a couple of different types of licenses. I already mentioned multiple activation keys, MAC keys. Those are the guys that are going to authenticate or activate against the Microsoft servers. And they're the ones who aren't normally in the office. The ones that are in the office all the time are going to get a volume license key for you volume license clients. And then they can activate internally to the KMS server. This is what it looks like to set it up. You should always set it up on the latest operating system that you have. So if you have Server 2008 R2, KMS running on that should be able to activate everything up to R2, including Vista and Windows 7. 2008, they were having some problems with Windows 7 machines activating to a 2008 server. I'm not sure if they've released the patch or not. So we've got KMS. The KMS server himself has to activate to the Microsoft activation servers. One time, that's all. Then he goes over to his local DNS domain, the domain where that guy is a member, that server. And he creates a service locator record for volume licensing, which I'm going to show you in a second. If you have multiple domains, you're going to have to go in and make some changes manually to get one KMS server to be allowed to activate clients from multiple DNS domains. Setting up KMS, it's as easy as just turning on the KMS key. There's no special software that has to be installed, but you do have to have a KMS key. So you go to the command line and use the Service License Manager, SLMGR, space -IPK, input key, and then input the KMS key. That KMS key can be used on 6 different KMS servers, and if you have to rebuild that server, you could do it 9 times with the same KMS key. So they're pretty reusable. We already mentioned that. Mentioned single domain. Whoever the KMS server is a member of, he automatically can service those clients because he's got his DNS record. If you want him to be able to service clients in another domain, you can do a couple of different things. You can manually create the SRV record, or on that KMS server, you can hack the registry here and input the DNS domain publish list, and then each domain has to be listed on its own specific line. You guys have probably seen this or done this in the past. Save that. We're going to launch DNS. Go down to my forward lookup zone. And I'm going to go down to the TCP folder. I'm going to create a new record. It's going to be an SRV record. The name will be _VLMCS, volume license. The protocol is going to be TCP. We're not going to deal with priority and wait, although it is finally recognized if you have multiple KMS servers. This is for the DNS gurus in the room. You have multiple KMS servers. This is how you can prioritize them or wait them. I've got a slide on that here in just a second, telling your clients which one they should go to first. The port is 1688, and this machine's name is KMS deploy.com. And you can see I've got a couple VLMCS records already there. Those are the service locator records your clients are going to look for when they're trying to activate with your KMS server. They go to DNS, they gather a list of that, then they start going through them. How often do your clients activate? Apparently once is not enough. So Microsoft has them doing it every 7 days. And it can get really chatty. As soon as it activates, it's going to start retrying. So it'll do it every 70 days. It's good every 7 days. It's good for 60 days, but then a week later it's going to try again. If it can't activate right then, it's going to try every 2 hours. Clients finding the KMS server, you can manually tell them which one to go to. You've got the SLMGR line right there. Or you can allow them to go by default to DNS and just get the SRV records from the DNS server. I told you about priority and wait. If you have multiple KMS servers, you could prioritize them. The lower the number, the better. So a priority of 0 and another KMS server with a priority of 1, clients are going to go to the one with 0 first. If he's not available, then they'll go to the one with the priority of 1. I don't know who uses waits, but if you happen to have all your KMS records at the same priority, and then you can choose to use waits instead of the priority. So all your priorities are set to 0. They're all important. But then you can weight it. When you weight it, the higher the number is better. So a server with the weight of 10 is going to get more traffic than a server with the weight of 5. But I think that's for really huge organizations. Doesn't have to be Microsoft DNS. You guys can still use Bind if you choose. KMS reporting, SCCM, SCOM, there's all kinds of fantastic reporting tools out there, but they are additional products to get. You also have event logs on KMS and on your clients that you can check. All right, I probably went over by a couple of minutes there, but we covered a lot. We covered a lot of the WAIK tools. If you hadn't had a chance yet to see DISM, I hope that you guys do use the cheat sheet method so you don't have to type those big, long, ugly commands out. And I've got cards up here for anybody who'd like to get a hold of my card for email information. It's in the slide deck as well. But I'll help you if you start using the tools, you have issues, or you just want to shoot me an email and say, hey, this was easier than I thought it was going to be. I'd love to hear from you guys. So thanks a lot for attending the session, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks, guys.